Very good. So we're back in session. When we left off, we were discussing the first item of agenda item 5. We had a motion, a second, good public discussion, good committee discussion, and a vote. It was pretty apparent that there were additional. Oh, we need to check on quorum. I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. I see names, but it doesn't mean you're there. So let's call quorum.
Babuian,
Here.
Cermak,
Here.
Clifford,
Here.
Farrow,
Present.
Heidelbeck,
Here.
Parada,
Here.
Huffman,
Yes, here.
Lynch,
I was on. It's doing roll call. Okay.
Lynch, Nebdal,
Here.
Heck,
Here.
Stevenson,
Here.
Woolsey,
Here.
Wu,
Here.
and you.
Here.
Thank you. Quorum is established.
Thank you, co-moderator. So as I was saying, we were on agenda item 5A. There were some committee members that wanted some additional comment on that item, so I'll open it up. Oh, and it appears that committee member Lynch is here. I see a hand raised.
Thank you, President.
So I don't know if Ms. Nevedal had what she wanted to raise as well. Ms. Nevedal?
Sure, thank you, Member Nevedal. I am hoping that we can entertain, and I'll just bring it forward, but for background's sake, it would be, excuse me, really fabulous to see an opportunity for event sales to qualify for retail under the micro business license. And what I mean by that is, again, going back to local zoning issues, the requirements, the land use requirements around having a brick and mortar place where you are open to welcome the public, as well as the requirements around having a delivery service where you're going to be making multiple trips a day from that site, are exponentially challenging for farmers, especially in rural areas. I want to mention that not only are there challenges just in the zoning and the cost, but also potentially with roads, narrow roads, public access, not always Category 4. Category 4 is required for commercial activities. So, if there is the ability for folks to do sales at events and qualify for retail so they can have consumer direct access, I think that that's an incredibly important opportunity to offer cultivators and manufacturers. So I would like to make a motion that the micro business license activities be allowed or be expanded to allow for retail sales at events, licensed events, to be a qualifying retail activity.
Okay, thank you. And that was a motion, I take it?
Yeah, that was the motion. I can repeat it if that
Nope.
needs to
I just
occur.
want to make sure that we've got it. Do we have that motion? Yes, okay. So do we have a second on the motion made by Ms. Nevedal?
This is Member Heidelbach. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion by committee members?
Committee Member Bokoyan, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Could you just repeat the motion again, please? Thank you.
The motion is that microbusiness activities be expanded to allow for retail sales at licensed events to be a qualifying retail activity. Committee Nebdal, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Committee Member Nevedal. So just the way the motion reads back, I just want to make sure that it's clear that my intention is that you would not have to have a storefront or a delivery service. You could simply utilize licensed events to fulfill your sales activity.
So can you do me a favor and repeat the motion with that included to make sure that we have that on the record?
Sorry, wrong button there. Yeah, sure. The intention is that you would be able to conduct sales at licensed events without also having to have a brick and mortar or a delivery sales permit or license in the state. Did that help clarify, co-moderator?
Hi there, this is Angela McIntyre with BCC Legal. I just wanted to clarify that for the purposes of retail activities under the Act, retail is defined as the retail sale and delivery of cannabis or cannabis products to customers. A retailer shall have a licensed premises, which is a physical location from which commercial cannabis activities are conducted, and their premises may be closed to the public. They may conduct sales exclusively by delivery, and that's enumerated in section 26070 of the Business and Professions Code.
Thank you for that. So I just want to make sure, this is Member Nevedal again, my apologies. I just want to make sure that it's clear that this activity is not currently allowed. So as a micro business license holder, folks do not currently have the opportunity to solely conduct their sales at licensed events. And what I mean by this is that the verification process from the licensing authority requires you to have permission to conduct either brick and mortar sales or delivery sales. And I think my concern here is that local jurisdictions do not generally allow for what we see as delivery services to be conducted from farms, right? There's conflicting land use. And so I'm hoping that by having this be at licensed events, it removes those conflicts that we currently see occurring for applicants. The cost of trying to figure out how to manage the capability and the capacity of having a retail delivery service that you only use a handful of times a year is simply not feasible. Like we're using it a handful of times a year just to go to events. That cost is excessive and not feasible from the point of development for many licensees. So this is why I'm suggesting there be clear language allowing for events to fulfill that retail activity.
Hi, excuse me. This is Angela McIntyre again from BCC Legal. I just wanted to clarify that the Bureau is unable to change the statutory definition of retailers under the Act, which require storefront or delivery activities to be taking place as a part of the retail operation.
Committee Member Yu, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I think I have two questions here then. One, would the motion then need to be changed to allow as another activity under micro business for events licensing? And then my second one is for member Nevedal to better understand the motion. Would this help small operators or legacy operators as well? This is just to uplift a point that member Cermak raised earlier.
This is member Nevedal, if I may respond. Hearing no objection to responding, the intention is to help small operators, rural operators, and I think in turn legacy cultivators, all of it across the board. Now, I do recognize the statutory limitations to retail, and I do think that that is an issue. I had not taken that into consideration when I made this motion.
So are you looking at maybe a different way of approaching this to achieve some of those goals, or do you believe that there is with the statutory limitations that we have? Committee member Lynn. Sorry, Nevedal.
I don't know. I still think it's an important need, and I would love to hear from committee member Cermak. His hand is raised while I contemplate, if I may.
Committee member Cermak, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just have several clarifications I need. One is, you say a licensed event. Does that mean that a microbusiness owner would have to have an additional license in order to hold an event? And at such events that you're talking about, would a microbusiness owner be permitted to be retailing only their own product, or would they be able to be retailing other products, other people's products? And I guess the third thing is, I'm just not quite clear whether or not, if all of this occurs so that there can be an event, does that mean that the microbusiness owner can erect a tent somewhere closer to town and schedule an event and hold it there, or is there any limitation on the locations? Those clarifications would be very useful.
Thank you, committee member Cermak. Council, you had something you needed to say?
Yes, thank you, co-moderator. This is Angela McIntyre, BCC Legal. As noted previously, for the purposes of a micro business license, qualifying activities include cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and or retail activities. To engage and participate in a temporary event, which the Bureau is authorized to issue temporary cannabis event licenses, such participants must be authorized to engage in the retail sale of cannabis at the event.
Committee member Neville, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, so the event license, I'm sorry, this is committee member Nevedal, sorry for not identifying myself. The event license doesn't necessarily fit into any of those categories, does it? It's not a retail license, nor is it a manufacturing type or a distro type. It's a standalone type, so.
Correct, it is a standalone type of license. However, participants who wish to engage in the sale of cannabis must be authorized by the Bureau to engage in retail sales.
Go ahead, committee member Neville.
Yeah, so this is where it gets really sticky again, is that being able to engage in retail sales triggers, whether it's as a delivery service or a brick and mortar, triggers these very intensive local land use requirements. And if you have to prove that you can conduct those sales and or delivery trips from your non-category 4 road to service the public, that is a major hindrance, and another substantial reason why the micro business license does not serve as a viable licensing option to legacy cultivators in many cases. I had looked at this as a creative way to try to make the license more amicable, and I also understand that in the past, the committee has made recommendations that don't necessarily stay within the parameters of statute. Now, I do think that at this point, I am not willing to consider withdrawing my recommendation. I'll just say that first and foremost, or the motion that's on the floor. But I do also want to say that I think this speaks to the complications here speak to the fact that the parameters that the definition for retail lays out pose some significant challenges. So we have jurisdictions that are very interested in figuring out how to manage agricultural tourism and rural tourism models that have included cannabis in the past into this legal framework and have crafted ordinances to try to make that happen. And there is largely no real pathway for that to happen for most of these local licensed entities, simply because of the narrowness of parameters put on activities such as retail sales. So I'm going to press that we hear this motion, even though there's potentially statutory requirements, in hopes that if there's support for expanding the micro business license in a manner that actually supports legacy cultivators and having direct access to their consumers, I think this can send that message, and I will yield the floor. Thank you.
Hello, I appreciate your explanation, Committee Member Nevedal. I do know, I recall we have made this recommendation for statutory changes to allow that to happen in the past, for cultivators to be able to, at least for the people in micro business licenses, to be able to do that. But I do think it's fine that we do the vote, but unless we make a recommendation, maybe with our year-end report again, we reemphasize the desire to allow, because you're in two spots. You got local land use issues in which local entities are defining on what kind of activities can be done on a piece of property. And so retail on a micro business, which is a home as well, maybe some challenge we'd have to get around. But if you did a cultivation and you allowed cultivators to sell to farmers markets, and that meets the retail, but that would require statutory change. So that would be my only thought. Again, we're getting ready to do our year-end annual report and recommendations for going forward. And the one unique difference between now and the others is that we were trying to make recommendations that were being just as difficult as there are multiple licensing processes and procedures for 3 agencies. We had any change that we had to go through 3 licensing entities. So maybe going into one may make our recommendations on our year end a little bit more palatable, because they're going to be doing reg packages anyways, and we might be able to do some legislative work to get the statutory changes necessary. So with that, if there's no other comments, let's open up to public comment.
Before that, Chair, I would really appreciate Committee Member Nevedal repeating her amended motion so that way we can, or her motion with everything attached, so we can have that for the record, please.
Thank you, co-moderator. Yes.
All right. Well, this is Committee Member Neville. This is where I wish I had taken better notes. So my apologies. Oh goodness. The motion is to allow for micro business license holders to utilize sales at licensed events to qualify as a retail activity, without also having to be a delivery service or a retail storefront.
Thank you. Let me get that and I will read it back. One moment. Okay, so I have, the motion is to allow for microbusiness license holders to utilize sales at licensed events to qualify as a retail activity without also having to be a delivery service or retail storefront.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And who was the second on that?
Committee Member
That
Heidelbach, Vice Chair Heidelbach.
And I support the amendment.
So with that, we'll open up to, if the moderator will open up the Q&A panel and allow for public comment. Thank you.
You're very welcome. This is the moderator, and I have opened the Q&A feature. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon located at the lower portion of your screen and submit "I would like to make a comment" and send to all panelists. We will take all comments in the order they are received. You will have a 1-minute time frame and provided a 20-second warning. With that, our first comment comes from Max Michelanis. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, good afternoon, committee. Max Michelanis, just with a comment on behalf of myself to go and clarify this discussion. My understanding and takeaway from the discussion is that Member Nevedal is seeking there's two parts to this. There's the first part is allow a licensee to get sort of a temporary retail authorization or temporary retail license that can be used at special events, so they don't have to run through some other retailer for special events. And secondly, to allow for a micro business that temporary retail authorization to be part of the micro business license.
20 seconds.
Maybe temporary isn't the right word, but that's my understanding of what Member Nevedal is seeking to do. Thank you.
Next, we have Paul and Susan Hansberry in Tibbin. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, this is Paul Hansberry, Lovingly and Legally. If I understand the, I forget her name, the lawyer that was citing statute, she said that you have to be authorized for a retail sale in order to go to an event. Well, if we have a micro business and you're authorized for retail, you don't necessarily have to be utilizing the delivery or a brick and mortar, but you are still authorized for retail with a micro business license. So you would still be able to use that for your retail aspect, I would imagine. I'd love to hear feedback from council about that. And Susan would like to make a comment.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. This is Susan Tibbin. You know, in the present corporatized and heavily capitalized dispensary environment, direct cultivator to consumer connection are really the only way to distinguish one's small batch product. We strongly support the motion because right now it's virtually impossible to even get shelf space at dispensaries. And the motion is particularly important for rural operators. We often don't have dispensaries in rural areas, and special events are our only avenue. So thank you, committee, for considering, approving this. It really would help us. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Hannah Nelson. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. I also strongly support the motion, and I'm reading the statute definition of retailer, and it actually states, in support of what Paul just said, a retailer may conduct sales exclusively by delivery. A regulation that interprets delivery as delivery to the customer at an event is one potential way to go, and a regulation that clarifies that a retailer, the statute says a retailer shall have a licensed premises from which a cannabis activities are conducted. It does not require them to actually conduct the sales there. So there is some room to interpret the statute in a
20
way
seconds.
that would effectuate the intent which committee member Nevedal is trying to accomplish, which I fully support, which is to address small, particularly rural operators that have zoning challenges. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Jackie Subek. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. I clearly see what Member Nevedal is proposing, and I absolutely support this motion. I think that cultivators should be allowed to transact directly with consumers. But I think that we're thinking of this maybe backwards. Given that we can't amend the definition of retail, why can't we amend the definition of event? And why can't we amend the language in the temporary event license to allow cultivators a pathway in? I mean, at least we'd start somewhere and grant them some form of temporary retail license, but it's in the event category, not in the retail category. And they'd have to stay within the confines of that licensed event, and they would have to retail their own products. They're not going to become a full-blown retailer. But I think that we absolutely should take that
20 seconds.
We should take that step and move this conversation forward. If we want to eventually get to cultivators at farmers markets, we got to start somewhere. This could be a great place to start. Thank you.
Next, we have an individual identified as Ross Gordon. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Ross Gordon, Humboldt County Growers Alliance. First, just want to say I'm just so happy to see intent being, I think, the same across the committee as well as every commenter, and that this isn't an issue like some other issues we've discussed where there's people sort of on the other side of this. It seems like everyone agrees that it is a good idea to make the micro-business license accessible to small cultivators. Speaking to this kind of point about legislation and some of the technical details we've been discussing on this topic, but also the previous topic related to micro-business, I think it speaks to a bigger issue, which is that the micro-business license has been held up because of technical details. And there's been a lot of discussion about helping the small farmer, but the representative organizations that represent small farmers, and I'm not just talking about Humboldt County Growers Alliance,
20 seconds.
have not been at the table in those conversations. And if you want to know why 5 years after this license was introduced in 2015, we still haven't figured this out, it's because you're not talking to us. And so my recommendation would be pass a motion with the intention of streamlining this and then work it out with the representative associations. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Eddie Franco. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you, committee members. Eddie Franco, Legislative Liaison with the California Cannabis Industry Association. We are in support of this motion. CCIA believes the licensing authority should establish a pathway that allows for applicants conducting sales at licensed cannabis events only to qualify as retail activity. We think that this motion is going to create a pathway that'll greatly expand the ability for outdoor, mixed light tier 1 and mixed light tier 2 cultivators to engage in the benefits of micro business license and conduct direct to consumer sales through things like a farmer's market model or the like. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I have some concerns about what is the training for these people that are going to be at special events? What do they know about direct sales to consumer? Why does it have to be a sale? Could they be at a special event just talking and meeting and greeting people and talking about their products? But when you start opening up the licenses here and carving out exceptions, especially when statutory language doesn't allow or looking for loopholes, that's troubling. So I don't agree with the idea that this should be some type of backdoor way of increasing the number of people retail sales. Again, retail sales, our biggest concerns are those potential sales to minors. We want to make sure that, unlike alcohol industry, you don't have responsible
20 seconds.
You don't have responsible beverage sales and service training for your retailers in any shape right now. Now you're bringing in more people that might be a farmer by day and now selling on the weekend here. And that's concerning about what's their training and to avoid that sale to an obviously intoxicated person or someone who's underage. Thank you.
Next, we have Erica Leary. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, my name is Erica Leary, and this is my first time listening to this committee meeting, and I do want to share some concerns as an advisory committee for the Bureau of Cannabis Control. I'm not hearing much discussion about the control aspect. So I hear everything about industry expansion, profit making, and ease into the market and rural farmers, and not much discussion of the unintended consequences, especially in the non-rural.
This is the co-moderator. I just want to make sure that the attendees are understanding that we are only addressing public comments on the motion that was presented.
Our next public comment comes from a Max Michelanis. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Sorry, no, I just was reiterating the text, my previous comments. Please mute me. Thank you.
This is the co-moderator again, and I also want to just address to attendees that the Q&A chat should be used to announce that you would like to make a verbal public comment. If you would like to submit a written comment, you can do that through our email at bcc@dca.ca.gov.
Thank you, co-moderator. Our next public comment comes from Joanna Cedar. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I'm going to agree with what Ross Gordon said, that we've established that it's difficult for those who were intended to engage in the micro-business license to do so. So reducing the barriers for entry for small farmers to avail themselves of this license type must take place both at the state and at the local level. So I thank you for taking up this motion, but the problem, we might need to look at this just to skew it a little bit. The problem is section 5500, subsection 6D, that the activities all occur on the same licensed premises, and all this motion does is amend that slightly to include sales at an official licensed event, and only those over the age of 21 can be admitted to those events. Thank you.
Next, we have Erica Leary to finish her previous comments. Erica, your microphone has been unmuted.
Okay, I was just clarifying that my comments were addressing this issue and to discuss the unintended potential consequences when you're not discussing the rural areas and how this exception could be manipulated and harm minors and public safety.
Mr. Chair, we have no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please. So
This feature has been closed.
We have a motion and a second. We've had some discussion. I do want to remind people that it wouldn't necessarily be direct to consumer because we cannot bypass, to the point the one person said, is public safety. And that means that there will be a trip no matter where it's cultivated. It's got to find its way to a testing facility before it goes to consumers. So, so with that, I'll open this up to a vote unless we have any more discussion from committee members. I see a committee member Nevedal has her hand raised.
Yeah, this is committee member Nevedal, and really quickly, I hear the public safety concerns, and I feel like I'm hearing a lot of concerns that there's not enough regulation wrapped around how this might work. So I do want to remind folks that licensed cannabis events are highly, highly regulated. You have to be a licensed cannabis event organizer to actually pull a permit from the Bureau for an event. You also have to have approval for that event and follow the permitting regulations and requirements of the local jurisdiction. A distributor would have to bring the material that was to be sold in final form after COA to the event. And all sales would be subject to the same standards that all retailers are subject to. So I just rest assured these are very heavily regulated events. And I understand folks are talking about farmers markets. Farmers market is not, in this reference, suggesting that you would walk down to your community square and see cannabis next to your tomatoes, right? These are, like I said, very highly regulated events. I think it was noted that only 21 and older are allowed to be in the area where cannabis is available for sale. The public cannot have visibility of any cannabis from outside of the event. I'm hoping that that helps to clarify that this still would be a very regulated activity. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and you did it much more detailed than I did. Thank you, Committee Member Nevedal. With that, I'll call the roll.
So the motion is to allow for microbusiness license holders to utilize sales at licensed events to qualify as a retail activity without also having to be a delivery service or retail storefront. Boboian?
Abstain.
Cermak?
Aye.
Clifford?
Aye.
Farah?
Aye.
Heidelbach? Committee Member Heidelbach?
Aye.
Rada?
Abstain.
Huffman?
Abstain.
Lynch?
Yes.
Nevedal?
Aye.
Heck?
Aye.
Stevenson?
Aye.
Woolsey?
Abstain.
Wu?
Abstain.
And you?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Committee Member Clifford, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Before we leave this topic, I just wanted to say I hope that we as a committee will come back to this soon and not kind of walk away from it now that we've considered it once. We had, the public comment on that last round was pretty interesting in some places. I'm not an expert on the licensing scheme, but I heard a couple of statutory ideas that were at least not on their face implausible sounding. And also kind of a desire, I got the sense there was a lot more kind of solutions-oriented discussion to be had on this topic. And so I just want to say I hope that we'll revisit this, having had the benefit of raising some of the issues, that we can take it on in more depth somehow. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. No, I think we'll be talking about it at our year-end report recommendations. I do believe, I think it needs a little bit more, there's got to be a little bit more finite information in it. So for example, if we were going to do this, would it be a qualifying activity if they only did one event a year? Would you look at the number of times the farmer who took this to market would want to? So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for discussion, but I think for the purpose, we know that with the current regulatory scheme, we probably will not get the outcome we want without getting some commitment to a statutory scheme change. So thank you. So with that, let's move on to 5B, which is premise requirements for microbusiness licenses. And I will read the portion related to this item. Question for the advisory committee. Should the requirements for a microbusiness premises be amended. Current law, Business Professions Code, sections 26001 AP, defines a premise as the designated structure or structures and land specified in the application that is owned, leased, or otherwise held under the control of the applicant or licensee, where the commercial cannabis activity will be or is conducted. The premise shall be a contiguous area and shall only be occupied by one licensee. California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 5500, requires that all cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and retail activities performed by a licensee under a microbusiness license occur on the same licensed premise. Additionally, areas of the licensed premise for manufacturing and cultivation must be separated from the distribution and retail areas by a wall, and all doors between the areas must remain closed when not in use. In the initial statement of reason and final statement of reason, the Bureau explained that walls and doors are required between these areas to ensure that cannabis goods that have undergone laboratory testing and are stored in the distribution and retail areas are not contaminated by the cultivation and manufacturing activities occurring on the premise. Considerations. A microbusiness is considered one premise where all activities are conducted at a single location. Thus, is it feasible to allow for activities not to be segregated from one another? Specific activities may cause contamination of cannabis goods if allowed to take place in the same area. For clarification of the premises provisions of the regulations should, did I read that right? Any clarification of the premises provisions of the regulations should ensure the requirements for a microbusiness premises are consistent with MCRSA and appropriately ensure consumer health and safety is protected. So I open it up for discussions. I see committee member Clifford has his hands raised.
Not on purpose, sorry, I just didn't take it down.
Okay. Do I have any other committee members that wish to make comment?
Committee member Baboulian, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. The comments I will make on this is this, the premises are a single premises anyway, and it really comes down to having the different activities segregated with a physical wall and barrier. And the general concern is the contamination factor. But then when you look at it, all product that gets sold through the dispensary to the end user consumer has to be tested anyway. So any contamination, it's really on the licensee to make sure there is no contamination, because one way or another, it's going to go through laboratory testing. It is going to get tested. If it's contaminated, it's just simply not going to pass. So I think there is something here we could do where we can take out some of the requirements to segregate the different activities between manufacturing, distribution, and cultivation. I just think it's burdensome without an overall, call it benefit, call it whatever. So just some thoughts to put out there to get the conversation started.
Thank you, Committee Member Baboulian. Committee Member Neftal, I see that your hand is raised. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I would, this is Committee Member Navadal. I would agree with Committee Member Baboulian on this wholeheartedly, especially, you know, having shared areas for storage. Once it's past COA, it's past COA. If it's in process, it's in process. So I think the requirement for walls is kind of almost hyper best practices in a lot of ways. But I would think through proper management of best management practices, good cultivation practices, good manufacturing practices on your processing and manufacturing activities, if you have that going on, utilizing track and trace and appropriate labeling and storage techniques, the requirement to separate these activities by walls doesn't seem to really make sense.
Oops.
Thank you, Committee Member Neville. If there's any other committee members wishing to make additional comments, please raise your hand. Committee Member Babolian, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, this is Committee Member Babolian. If there aren't any more discussions on this, I would make a motion to take out the requirements to have all the different activities separated by a physical wall or barrier in a micro business.
This is Member Peck. I'd like to second that motion.
Motion and a second. Not seeing any additional committee member hands, I'll ask the moderator to open the Q&A section and take public.
For that, Chair, I'm going to repeat the motion to Committee Member Babolian to make sure that we have it recorded correctly. Committee Member Babolian, I have your motion as to take out the requirements to have all the different activities be separated by a physical wall or barrier in a micro business. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your screen and submit "I would like to make a comment." All other submissions will not be addressed. I will pause a moment to allow individuals time to access this feature. Individuals identified as Paul and Susan Hansberry and Tibbin, your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, hi, this is Paul Hansberry, lovingly and legally. I fully support the number of different things regarding microbusiness that were outlined in my written comments, possible outlines of possible solutions for this. Someone who is using a room for, say, drying at one point could be using it for manufacturing at another point of the process, and keeping things apart. Once again, I think that this wall separation requirement is more best practices, and the regulations are more of a solution looking for a problem. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. This is Susan Tibbin, lovingly and legally. Strongly support this motion. You know, the way it is now, it's sort of, it's kind of giving a leg up to indoor. And, you know, we know that is very often environmentally not best practice. So let's make it more possible for people to be reusing spaces for different activities all throughout the growing season. Makes much more sense environmentally and financially as well. Strongly support the motion. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from Jackie Subek. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to touch on what we talked about yesterday, because lounges, particularly in West Hollywood, were designed to be micro businesses. We have an ancillary manufacturing and cultivation built into the license. If the food and beverage that we talked about yesterday ends up being in the final regulations, we're going to need to amend the DPH manufacturing regulations that currently.
This is the BCC co-moderator. Right now, we are only taking public comment on the motion that was presented by Committee Member Babolian.
Our next public comment comes from Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, Wade Laughter with House of Harlequin. I want to express support for the motion and observe per Chair Perro's observation as well, that the microbusiness thing originally was intended to help small farmers, and all of the barriers that you can remove, and this is perfect motion because that's what we're talking about, barriers, will help again, the legal market flourish as versus the illicit market, which is flourishing as we speak. Thank you for your time today.
Our next public comment comes from William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I'm just curious and I'm looking for some clarification, so I'm asking this question to the chair and the BCC. It's my understanding from the proposed rules that a test sample is in a 50-pound batch of product. And I just want clarification if that's the case. It would seem there's a lot of opportunity for contaminants to be missed in that 50-pound batch if they're only testing a small sample of it. And how does that play into using the same space over and over again? The other part I would like to ask is why do we have the rules in the BCC about needing a separate room with a wall for that? So I'm looking for some clarification on the historical establishment of these rules. Thank you.
Next, we have Hannah Nelson. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. Hannah Nelson, I'm an attorney and I'm from Mendocino County, so I mostly deal with small operators and small farmers in particular. And one of the things that I've experienced is that people are very conscious of environmental impacts, not only because of the zoning requirements and the additional burdens and expense of getting commercial buildings or additional commercial buildings, but also the credo of respecting the land, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And contamination is completely against the best interest of the operator. They have to have their product tested.
20 seconds.
Track and trace. They are completely able to avoid contamination and still utilize the same facility for different types of activities at different time. So I strongly support the motion and ask that you consider other areas in which anything that is not strictly prohibited by statute can be
Time had been reached. Our next public comment comes from Glenda Driver. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, I strongly support this motion. I think anything that helps to bring some kind of parity for those who have been disenfranchised and are having problems getting into the industry, I think this is helpful and I strongly support it.
This is the co-moderator. I'm just checking in to remind attendees that we are taking comments on the motion that is pending as of this moment.
This is the moderator. I'm going to go ahead and open up Jackie Subek's mic once again. Please keep in mind, we are only taking public comment on this particular agenda item.
Thank you.
You are unmuted.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What I was saying is that if you remove the walls, which I'm all for, you have to understand that for the lounges who have a kitchen on the same premises, that is a current problem in the regs. And so even by opening up the walls, we're still going to have an issue there. So I just wanted to bring that up so that we could talk about it. Thank you.
If you would like to make a public comment, please submit that you would like to make a public comment. All other types of requests, hand raises, or any other language in the Q&A panel will not be addressed. At this time, Mr. Chair, we do not have any additional requests for public comment. I do have a hand raised.
We will give 1 second for the person with the hand raised to type onto the Q&A box that they wish to make a comment. And if we don't get it,
With us not.
okay, so then let's close the Q&A box and have the motion restated for the committee and have a vote.
So the motion is to take out the requirements to have all the different activities be separated by a physical wall or barrier in a micro business. Baboulian,
Aye.
Cermak,
Abstain.
Clifford,
Aye.
Farrow,
Aye.
Heidelberg,
Abstain.
Harada,
Abstain.
Huffman,
Abstain.
Lynch,
No.
Nevdal,
Aye.
Heck,
Aye.
Stevenson,
Abstain.
Woolsey,
No.
Wu,
Abstain.
and you.
Abstain.
Motion passes.
Dr. Cermak, I see your hand is raised.
We've had several votes recently with abstentions. They seem to be increasing in number in the votes. And I'm curious as to why that's happening. I know that the reason it's happened for me on this one is that I just didn't have enough information. I suppose perhaps I should have voted no if I didn't feel I had enough information to make an informed decision. I think we need to ask ourselves why so many abstentions are beginning to happen.
Thank you for that. Committee Member Lynch.
Yes, I appreciate those comments. I am having the same concern here where we have very little information on huge issues that have, potentially unintended consequences that are, possibly good for the industry, but also raise public health concerns. We are down 5 participants, and having this large of abstentions to me really speaks to the volume of which lack of information, lack of materials in advance on the important issues that are before us. And I just would echo the concerns.
Thank you, Committee Member Lynch. Well, let's hope this next topic we can talk through and people will feel they have enough information to take a position one way or the other.
Mr. Chair, Mr.
Yes.
Chair, you do have a hand raised from Committee Member Clifford.
Oh, I'm sorry, Committee Member Clifford. Thank you.
Yeah, just very briefly, same comment as the last two. I'll just point out if we need to consider subcommittees at some point, that might be an option as well.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no additional hands, we're going to move on.
Actually, Committee Member Baboulian has his hand raised.
Sorry. Committee Member Baboulian, I recognize you.
Thank you, Chair. A comment I would make to kind of echo the last 3 comments. This committee is made up of people representing a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different interests. We have public health represented, we have municipalities, law enforcement, industry people represented. So, I mean, the abstaining from a vote usually should be reserved for certain situations. If there are certain things where information is not available, or there's something that needs clarification, or more understanding or more discussion, I would really strongly encourage people to ask questions, even if it's from other committee members, because all of us have different experiences. All of us come from different, we represent different stakeholders in this. And if we're representing different stakeholders, it's really on us to ask a lot of the questions, and even within the committee, and not just hope for our questions to be answered by public comment. That's all I want to say.
Thank you for those comments, Committee Member Baboulian. Yeah, a lot of this information, if we have this in advance, we could do a little research on our own on the regs And I agree with you that there are people from different backgrounds, and the point they are interacting with this industry are from different positions. And these can be challenging. So I hear you loud and clear. I've been wondering them myself. So that said, let's move on.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but Committee Member Peck has her hand raised.
Yes, Committee Member Peck, you are recognized.
Thank you. I appreciate all the comments because I started recognizing this yesterday, and I even Googled what an abstention. I mean, I was always told an abstention vote is a no vote. So I had to Google it, look it up, and see what an abstention really means. And I think that based upon the comments, I think we're right in line of all the comments that have previously been made. But I do think that it is recognizable, and also issues can be tabled as well. So I think there are mechanisms out there for us to address if we're questioning all different types of questions in the items that we've been going over the last 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you. And unfortunately, as much as I'd like to have a long discussion about this and the oddity of our abstentions and the voting patterns, we don't have that as an agenda item. So I really want to get moving. We've got a lot of topics to try to cover if we can. And so I hear you loud and clear, and I share your concerns, and we will have to do better to make sure that people feel comfortable in their decisions. With that, I'm going to move on to 5C, which is security requirements for micro businesses. And the question put before the advisory committee is, are the current security requirements and regulations sufficient, or does the state need to consider other security measures? Current law, California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 5500 requires that licensed microbusinesses comply with the security rules and requirements applicable to the corresponding license type suitable for the activities of the licensee. For example, a microbusiness engaging in retail sales from a storefront would need to hire security personnel for on-site security services over the retail portion of the premises, consistent with California Code of Regulations Title 16, Sections 5045, which requires licensed retailers to have on-site security during hours of operation. However, a microbusiness engaging in cultivation would not have to comply with the Bureau's video surveillance requirements under California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 5044, because CDFA does not require video surveillance over cultivation activities. So the considerations: clarify the security requirements for microbusinesses to ensure the measures are appropriate for the activities being conducted. With that, I'll open it up to committee members' consideration, conversations, recommendations, and motions.
Committee Member Yu, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Has there, and this is a question for the state, has there been any reported security issues with existing microbusiness license holders? And if so, could you share any of the challenges?
Hi, this is Angela McIntyre from BCC Legal. We do not have that data on hand to report. Moreover, any data that we would have is self-reported.
Thank you.
Committee Member Woolsey, I see that you have your hand up. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I have a question related to the statement above the considerations that are presented on the screen. It says that a microbusiness in cultivation doesn't have to comply with video surveillance because CDFA doesn't require video for cultivation. Is the assertion that they wouldn't have to comply with video surveillance across the entire premises or only in the cultivation area?
Hi, this is Angela McIntyre from BCC Legal. I just wanted to clarify that under the current regulations, microbusiness licensees are responsible for complying with the security requirements that are applicable to their individual license activities. So the cultivation portion of their premises would be responsible for complying with those regulations. Similarly, a licensed microbusiness authorized to engage in retail and distribution would be responsible for complying with the corresponding security requirements.
Thank you. That does clarify my question. So that leads me to the follow-up question is, if a normal cultivator, if I'm just a cultivator, and that's all I do in my building, and I just have a cultivation license, I don't need video in my cultivation area. If I'm a micro business, I would meet that same requirement, but if in my retail space, I would have to have video over there, or my manufacturing space or distro or whatever, I have to meet those security requirements. So I fail to see where there's a potential problem or conflict under this consideration.
Thank you, Committee Member Woolsey. Committee Member Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Without any data on security issues, it's very hard to vote for anything that would reduce the security requirements.
Thank you. Committee Member Boboian, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, I was going to say what Member Woolsey said. If you're a microbusiness licensee and you're choosing to participate in any one-day activities, those activities come with certain security requirements that are applicable to that activity. So I'm not sure what the question or issue or what needs to be clarified, but I think just leaving it the way it is. If you're participating in an activity, it's on you to comply with those requirements, security and otherwise.
Thank you, Committee Member Boboian. If there's any other committee members wishing to make a comment, please raise your hand. Chair, I'm not seeing any additional hands raised.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your comments. Can we open this topic up to the question and answer moderator so that way we can get public comments?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please click on the icon located in the bottom portion of your screen and submit "I would like to make a public comment." As a reminder, raised hands and any other submissions by members of the public will not be addressed. Our first public comment comes from a Hannah Nelson. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hannah Nelson, and I believe that the issue is related to what happens during consolidation if licensing is merged and taking into account overseen not just by CDFA if that's what happens, but rather the consolidated agency. And so I would recommend that each activity be evaluated as currently stated in the regulations, and that further review of any appropriate levels of activity for those security for those activities be conducted by the agencies while they are consolidating. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from individuals identified as Paul and Susan Hansberry and Tibbin. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, thank you. This is Paul Hansberry, Lovingly and Legally. First of all, I noticed that in the previous agenda item that the topic of contiguous was not addressed, and auxiliary licenses for land use in certain areas that prevent or prohibit a microbusiness. But on the subject of security, I certainly think that it should be site-specific. Just as a CEQA document, it needs to be site-specific. There's higher standards set for Fort Knox than there is for a lemonade stand. I think that the local jurisdiction should be able to use its discretion in allowing what would be acceptable security for someone who is out in the middle of nowhere as opposed to someone who is in East LA. So I think that security should be tiered and based on the application on a site-specific one-to-one basis. Thank you very much.
Is Susan going to be talking and taking a minute as well?
Yes, thank you. Susan Tibbin, Lovingly and Legally. I'd like to second and reiterate a bit Paul Hansberry's comment, and that is that we're seeing operators in very rural settings, and then we're seeing operators in the middle of densely populated areas. And so one size just does not fit all, and I think we can apply that phrase to many of the regulations, and more specifically to the interpretation. So let's go ahead and try and make our regulations fit the particular operators. I know that can be more difficult and time consuming, but in the long run, it will make things better for everyone and reduce the illegal market.
Our next public comment comes from Eddie Franco. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you, committee members. Eddie Franco, Legislative Liaison with the California Cannabis Industry Association. As it relates to security requirements for micro businesses, we recommend that security requirements should be deferred to local jurisdictions, just like you see them deferred just like you see with the same licenses that are issued by the Department of Food and Agriculture. Just leave it to the locals. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Ross Gordon. Your microphone is unmuted.
Russ Gordon, Humboldt County Growers Alliance. Want to echo the previous two comments from Eddie Franco and from Paul Hansberry. I think the issue here is rural cultivators being held to the same security standards, which include security personnel on site, alarm systems, as well as video surveillance that folks in urban areas are held to. And, going back for a moment, this committee did recommend that micro-business licenses, in order to make them accessible to rural cultivators, should be able to have event sales as a qualifying activity. And I think if, the committee is going down that road and they're saying that it's important to lower those barriers, but at the same time is going to ask for, 24/7 security personnel on remote farms, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so I am sensing some pushback from the committee on this idea of devolving security requirements for locals. And I think it speaks to why this is a really complicated issue that's hard to address in 60-second sound bites.
15 seconds.
The committee is, I think, starting to recognize with these abstentions. And I really hope there's a broader looking at all of this, because you can fix some things, but not fix others and end up streamlining for big business while continuing to exclude rural cultivators. Thank you.
Next, we have William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I would just like to note, again, look at the potential unintended consequences. Wherever you're located in California, if there's an illicit, illegal grow around, means you have criminal activity in that area. And the criminals, whether they're taking their own illicit grows or somebody else's grow that's a licensed grow, we need to make sure that we have adequate security for that. And so, this seems to be another request by industry for a benefit to take away security requirements at the expense of public health and safety. And for those that are abstaining from voting, please note that that's not counting for anything. A small number of yes votes are then carrying the motions. Please vote no if you really want to abstain. Thank you.
At this time, I have received no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please. I know we don't have a motion to discuss, but I do want to note that it's really interesting, depending on the frame that you're visiting us on, is that there are some people who responded that they thought there was an effort to increase security, and then there were some people thinking that there was going to be a decrease in security. And the question that was put before us was, should it be changed? So that just tells a little bit about where we are. And I see Ms. Nevedal's hand raised.
Thank you, Chair Farrell. This is Member Nevedal, and I appreciate those comments quite a bit. I also wanted to just address this concept of like event sales and how that might impact or not impact micro businesses' premise.
Hi, Committee Member Nevedal. I'd like to remind you that we're referring to security requirements on the agenda. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure folks were rest assured that the security requirements that would be happening for those sales would be at the event location where the sales are occurring. And under the actions of the committee today, and also under like how the regulations currently sit, we have done nothing to recommend that requirements would change for cultivators or for, for micro businesses engaged in cultivation or micro businesses engaged in manufacturing. So in alignment with Chair Farrow's comments, I don't think we had took any effort to decrease or increase the security requirements anywhere in the micro business framework. And so I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Nevedal. Unfortunately, my screen doesn't let me see everybody at once, so I have to scroll a little bit. So seeing none and having no motion, I move to agenda item number 6. So with moving to agenda item number 6, this is background for recommendations related to testing laboratories and regulatory compliance testing of analytes and other substances in cannabis goods. Wow, that was a word I haven't seen in a very long time. Questions for the advisory committee: should the substances and analytes tested for be changed, and if so, how? Current law, BPC section 26100 subdivision A provides that, except as otherwise provided by law, cannabis or cannabis products shall not be sold pursuant to a license provided under this division unless a representative sample of the cannabis or cannabis products has been tested by a licensed testing laboratory. California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 5714, subdivisions D and E require each representative sample be tested for cannabinoids, foreign materials, heavy metals, microbial impurities, mycotoxins. I don't know if that's micro, it's mycotoxin. I added an R I shouldn't have. Moisture content, water activity, residual pesticides, residual solvents, and processing chemicals, and if applicable, terpenoids. Considerations: certain compounds such as vitamin E acetate have recently been found to be harmful in inhaled cannabis products. Additionally, now that the regulations have been in place for a period of time, should there be changes to what is required to be tested for? Any changes to the substances and analytes testing for or the action levels should ensure cannabis goods safe for human consumption. Testing of, and that would be the end of that. I open it up to committee members for discussions, recommendations, or motions.
Any committee members wishing to make a comment, please raise your hand. Committee Member Bogoyan, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. To kick things off, I think with the laboratory testing and what's being tested for, it may be burdensome in some areas, but I think it's necessary at this time, where we are as an industry, with unknowns and uncertainties. So while it is burdensome, I think it is necessary. what's in place. And this is one area where I think would be really great to get somebody with laboratory experience or from a lab to be able to kind of comment on the different things being tested for, what the causes are, what the potentials are, etc.
Thank you, Committee Member Boholian. Committee Member Cermak, I see that your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
I would like someone to tell me exactly which cannabinoids are tested for and whether or not those are included in the packaging, what the amounts are. Thank you.
We are going to have someone pull that up, see if we can answer that for you. Dr. Cermak.
Hi, this is Angela McIntyre, BCC Legal. Section 5307.1 identifies quality assurance review for the purposes of labeling cannabinoids and terpenoids. Regarding your labeling question, it indicates that any one cannabinoid, total THC and or total CBD claimed to be present on a label shall not be considered inaccurate if it's within 10%. Moreover, let me pull that up. Section 5724 indicates that laboratories shall analyze at a minimum 0.5 grams of the representative sample of cannabis goods to determine the cannabinoid profile such as THC, THCA, CBD, CBDA, CBG, and CBN.
Thank you very much. That's what I needed.
Committee Member Cermak, did you have any additional comments to that?
I don't. No, I don't. Thank you.
Any other committee members wishing to make a comment, please raise your hand. Chair, I am seeing no additional hands raised.
Very good. If we have no additional committee member comments, I open this up to public comment. Could you please do that for us, moderator?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please submit that you would request to make a verbal comment, and we will answer your requests in the order they are received. First up, we have an individual identified as Victoria Basso. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello. Rather than opening up to more testing, I really think we need to discuss the standardization of methods across laboratories. Distributors, manufacturers, and cultivators get varying results across the laboratories because everybody is using a various method. And so I think this needs to become a priority to standardize methodology within the lab space.
Our next public comment comes from Dylan Burns. Your microphone has been unmuted. Dylan, you are unmuted. Our next public comment comes from Eddie Franco. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thanks, committee. Eddie Franco, legislative liaison with CCIA. There's currently a lack of uniformity in the regulations concerning how to test for the various pesticides and other contaminants in cannabis. For instance, the regs assign certain action levels for testing.
Sorry, this is Angela McIntyre with BCC Legal. I'd like to remind folks that are commenting that we are currently discussing the agenda topic regarding what substances and analytes should be tested, and if so, how.
Yeah, this comment's related to that. So what we're saying is that we should be establishing specific action levels for all of the analytes and other substances, the compounds and contaminants that are required to be tested under law, including category 1. This will lead to greater standardization and less variation among the testing labs. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from William Perno. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, thank you. William Perno, and I do have questions regarding the testing. I'll again ask my question and hope that a committee member can ask someone from the BCC. What is the size and weight of the representative sample? I asked earlier and was suggesting it was a 50-pound sample that's being tested, or a sample out of a 50-pound batch. The other question is, are current samples being tested for vitamin E acetate? Because that is what is at the heart of the E-Valley cases. And the Centers for Disease Control, I'm looking at a statistic right here, as of February 18, 2020, reported 2,870 Valley cases or deaths have been reported to the CDC from all 50 states. 68 deaths have been confirmed.
20 seconds.
68 deaths being confirmed in 29 states in the District of Columbia. And as noted in the agenda item, vitamin E acetate was one of the things they were looking at as the cause of that serious harm and death. So is the current testing looking for vitamin E acetate in testing samples? And I'd like that question asked and answered.
Time had been reached. Our next comment comes from Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, thank you, committee. Wade Laughter, House of Harlequin. Testing is a really essential part of protecting health and safety. And as for the specific analytes that should be tested for, I would recommend that the regulating agencies look to the method of consumption that is intended for that product. That is really the real conversation here is about products that are intended to be inhaled as versus used in other ways. And cannabis has many therapeutic pathways, one of which is inhalation. And it is much more fraught with danger about contaminants.
20 seconds.
Thank you.
Next, we have an individual identified as Bobby Jones. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you, committee. Bobby Jones, JCG Management Group. I'm kind of confused on what we're talking about. Either it's the flower or the vapes, but I think we should reduce the testing to minimal, only toxic situations, because I've seen flower and other tests for hair and all that be thrown out. So I think it should only be toxic situations in regards to either the flower or the vape. And at the same time, if the tobacco industry can have much smaller test results to introduce their product to the consumer, this is a health and wellness product. These are patients. So I don't know why we have all these tests. So we need to streamline it down just to toxic materials. Thank you.
Next, we have Glenda Driver. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, my name is Glenda Driver. I'm with Genesis Investing Solutions as a researcher. One of the things that we're very concerned about is the potency with regards to cannabis, and also how you measure that potency from one flower to the next, when that one flower to the next can be very different with regards to potency. So we would like to see a more definitive testing agenda that labels out potency per plant, rather than to throw everything in a batch like Mississippi does to us, and we cannot determine what that real potency is. If you take one handful to another handful,
20 seconds.
Different potency levels. Thank you.
Next up is Joanna Cedar. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I'm going to agree with Wade Laughter and about being specific about the manner in which the product is going to be consumed. And with specificity to heavy metals, as an example, of course, it's going to be important to test vape cartridges, the heavy metals, because they're that's the final form. However, when it comes to an edible, oftentimes the product will fail not because of the cannabis, but because of the chocolate. And so that chocolate
20
is commercially
seconds.
available. And so it would be important to recognize the method of ingestion in order to determine how we should revamp the testing requirements. Thank you.
Next, we have Max Michelanis. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Max Piccolonis on behalf of the Flow Cannabis Company. With the evolving vaping crisis that befell the nation in the fall of 2019, it was at first mysterious without a clear cause. In time, it was identified that additives such as vitamin E acetate, propylene glycol, polyethylene glycol, and medium-chain triglyceride oil, which have been approved by the FDA as food additives, were found to be harmful to lung tissue when inhaled in vaporized form. Some states have already banned the use of vitamin E acetate in vapes as a result. Should science conclude that vitamin E acetate and other fillers are harmful to health of most users, then they should be tested for and prohibited in inhaled manufactured cannabis products. This is the strength of our regulated market compared to the unlicensed, untested, unregulated, illicit market. That science can have this impact on finished products.
10 seconds.
Outcomes. So ultimately, we support additional regulations on fillers, on regulation banning on these fillers for vape products. Thank you.
Hi, this is the co-moderator. We've received some questions or some requests that the question that was presented to the committee be repeated. So this is on agenda item 6A, regulatory compliance testing of analytes and other substances in cannabis goods. And the question that was for the committee is, should the substances and analytes tested for be changed? And if so, how? So that is what we are accepting public comment on at this moment.
Our next public comment comes from Casey Strain. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I guess it's a little unclear whether or not the current testing requirements are testing for vitamin E acetate, but we hope that they are, and if they're not, they should be. If we're serious about the health and safety of consumers and patients, then we need to be testing for vitamin E acetate. As Mr. Perno mentioned earlier, the CDC has concluded that they believe that that is the substance that's contributing to all of the E-Valley cases. And these are really sad stories of people's lungs who have just been destroyed from vaping the vitamin E acetate. So please continue to test for that. It's a matter of health and safety. Thank you.
Next, we have Antoinette Duncan. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, my comment is related to action limits. And so is that an appropriate time to bring up this comment?
This is the moderator, and if I were to guess, I would say no, that's not part of what the current agenda is, but
yes, that is.
It is? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, my name is Antoinette Duncan with Cannabis Labs, and I would like to recommend that specific action levels be assigned to Category 1 pesticides. There's tremendous variation with the sensitivity of instrumentation at the various labs, and those labs with less sensitive instruments often have higher LODs. This negatively impacts labs with more sensitive instrumentation with lower LODs, and it causes more pesticide failures to be reported. So my recommendation is to include a very specific action limit for each Category 1 pesticide. Thank you.
Next, we have Dylan Burns. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, committee. Thank you for your time. My name is Dylan Burns with Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs in San Diego. I'd like to second what Antoinette Duncan said about specific action levels for Category 1 pesticides. Currently, the action level is detect, non-detect, and like Antoinette said, it creates a massive uneven playing field for the different labs and the clients that they're testing for. And furthermore, backing what the other comments were said about addressing the drastic discrepancies that you'll see in potency numbers from lab to lab. Definitely, we need to establish action levels for Cat 1 pesticides.
20 seconds.
If the committee is interested in surveying the different lab COAs, a lot of labs are saying what their detection limits are, and that could help guide the committee in deciding a number. Thank you for your time.
Before I continue on to the rest of our requests, could Eddie Franco and Victoria Basso please lower your hands? Next up, we have an individual identified as Ross Gordon. Your microphone has been unmuted. Ross, you are unmuted. Moving on to our next request comes from Paul and Susan Hansberry and Tibbin. Your microphone is unmuted.
Yes, hi, this is Paul Hansberry, lovingly and legally. I'm wondering if during the testing process that there is, they test for particulate and foreign substances. I'm wondering if there are allowances or potentially temporary allowances for things such as ash from the wildfires for outdoor cultivators, to see how dangerous this might be if it really is a health hazard, if you have ash particulate that's fallen on your crop, or if it's just sent to be remediation and the crop is a failure. I wonder if there's a way to determine how dangerous that might be, and if there could be exceptions made for this disaster or for this emergency.
10 seconds.
Thank you very much.
Is Susan going to be making?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Susan. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Susan Tibbin, Lovingly and Legally. Following up on Paul Hansberry's comment, we know from the herbal pharmacopoeia, which the regulatory agencies have used to determine what kinds of tests we need, that cannabis, like mint, is subject to various kinds of molds, which actually are fairly inert and not dangerous, and also very easily remediated. So we want to make sure, particularly with possible pollutants from the fire and the fire retardants, that we're being as accurate as possible so that we don't see complete disaster, particularly for smaller entities with, fairly small crops. Let's make it possible for them to remediate if need be.
Next, we have Charles Pappas. Your microphone has been unmuted. Charles, you are unmuted. Next, we have Marnie Berger. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi. So the current cannabis test for naturally occurring substances, and sometimes that's a fail. No other product is tested as stringently as cannabis. 100% of wine tested in California contained glyphosate or Roundup. And that's really dangerous, cancer-causing, messes up the gut flora. And that is public safety. That is a hazard. And tobacco is not tested.
20 seconds.
Well, the cost of testing isn't affordable for small producers. COA tests are $800 each. And we need to also talk about the impact of the tests and the requirements on small outdoor.
Time had been reached. Next up, we have Erica Leary. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, I'd like to echo the comments previously made about testing for vitamin E acetate. I also have a question about if there's current health warnings on cannabis products, specifically those smoked and vaped. And just in general, I'm curious how this item is being discussed without a report, kind of giving the history and reasoning for this item to inform the committee members more thoroughly.
Next, we have Hannah Nelson. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, thank you, Hannah Nelson. I would echo some of the comments regarding the wildfires. Of course, we want to promote safety in consumption, but I think it's important to make sure and distinguish whether or not the particulates or other matter that are detected are actually unsafe. And there was quite a bit of, I'm from Mendocino County, where we have the largest area of the August complex fire, and this is going to be an enormous issue for cultivators. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment comes from Charles Pappas. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, again, I'm from Berkeley Cannabis Commission and Divinity Tree, formerly in San Francisco. This is a complex issue. I think you probably need a subcommittee, and especially considering ash and contaminants previously and newer contaminants. One thing I'd like to say about THC levels, I'm not sure that that's that important. A lot of products work that aren't that high in THC. So, but it's an important issue. Astute comments by the public. So I hope you pay enough attention to this to maybe form a subcommittee and work things out and give the Bureau some good advice.
I have received no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this? Take that back. One just came in. An individual identified as Josh Swider. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, thank you for taking the time today. My name is Josh Sweeter from Infinite Cal down here in San Diego. I'd like to reiterate the point that there are analytes being tested that for category 1 that are failed, not failed, that a memorandum came out from the Department of Pesticides a year ago talking about how to fix this problem, and it has been ignored since then. Also, I'd like to bring up the point that we're only talking about pesticides here. There are other analytes that have problems, like such things as solvents. We should really look at those with detect, non-detect, and also limits of other ones. Some of those things cannot be harmful if consumed by smoking it. So we should really look into analytes in that, as well as analytes for potency. Potency analytes can be a major problem when it comes to sale of this product and giving competitive edges against other cannabis labs while producing higher results. Thank you.
At this time, we do not have any additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Please do, and I'm going to make a couple comments. And I'm actually going to go out of my norm here, but we'll start with the comment. We don't, when questions are asked during the public comment, it is a comment, it isn't a question. And so it is not the norm. I don't even know if it's proper because it isn't noticed for us to answer questions from the public comment piece. So don't take it personally if we don't respond to that. That's just not how this is done. You can be assured, though, any question that you ask is being reviewed and considered as regs are being made or could end up as a future agenda item if it isn't addressed. Second, the discussions of solvents, the discussions of level 1 pesticides, and the needs for actionable levels to be identified are accurate. I am not a scientist, but my motion is going to be very much like the vitamin E acetate that is being used as a solvent, that we should be testing for these solvents, and we should be we should be setting action levels for level 1 pesticides. So my motion is that when the new agencies come into one and a new set of regs are produced, that these regs require testing laboratories to test for level 1 pesticides, not at just simple pass or fail, but at action levels, and that solvents, including vitamin E acetate, be included in that testing.
This is Cermak. I second that motion.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I said this is committee member Cermak, and I second that motion.
Very good. And I'm going to try to do this motion again, since I'm not, I wasn't making notes. It was from hearing such great public comment and the concern that we had not made a motion in advance, that I didn't want to lose the opportunity to get a motion on this public safety issue, and leveling the field for those employers that are doing the right thing and not putting them up against people who are having products tested at a lot lower stringency. So my recommendation is that the agency set regulations to ensure that all cannabis goods are tested for solvents, including vitamin E acetate, as well as set action levels for all level 1 pesticides in the testing process.
I have a question. Alice,
Yes. First of all, I want to make sure that that is the second that Dr. Cermak seconded.
This is committee member Cermak. Yes, that is what I seconded.
Very good. Committee member Huffman, you can ask your point of clarification.
I'd just like to know, does the testing include the ash and particulates that have fallen recently from the smoke damage?
I am not a scientist, but I do know that there is testing for foreign materials. I don't know if ash and other fire-related residue. Could I get a clarification if that would be?
Ash itself is not specifically identified in the testing regulations. However, some of the constituents that are a part of the ash may be captured by the other items that are analytes that are tested under the Bureau's regulations.
Very good. Does that answer your question, Committee Member Huffman?
Can we just include ash to be sure it's tested for that?
I would be, I think there's a lot more parts to the ash. So we would want to say the components that are typically found in fire ash, because there's going to be carbon in that. There's probably some other chemicals that would be. So I'm fine with the modification to say, in addition to solvents such as vitamin E acetate, level 1 pesticide action levels, or any other chemical compounds directly related to the production of ash from recent fires.
Thank you.
Would you accept that friendly amendment, Dr. Cermak?
Yes, I accept it. I lost my.
Dr. Cermak?
Are you able to hear me now?
Now we are, yes.
Okay. I'm not certain about that because I don't know enough about ash and all the components to ash. And I'd be a little bit happier if CDPH could do a quick recommendation about what aspects of that are dangerous and need to be tested for, rather than making a recommendation that's blank.
In the effort to, because I don't know that we could put them on the spot with such short notice to be able to give you the appropriate and accurate response, why don't we do this? I will ensure that on our next agenda item next month, when we come back, that we will add that to a consideration for an addition to the testing requirements. Would that satisfy your concern, Committee Member Huffman?
Nope. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I think the concern is if we, because there is ash may not accurately get what you're looking towards, that we would have the CDPH come back next month, explain the characteristics and the chemicals that potentially could be found in cannabis as a result of the fires, and then to be able to accept a motion on that to add that to the additions that we're adding now to testing. That way it allows us to move forward today and then bring this issue up next month. Would that work?
I agree. If I could find my screen went out. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, and if you will allow us to move with the original motion,
yes,
and I
please.
commit to you that we will bring it. Okay, very good. So Dr. Cermak, we will move with the motion on solvents, including vitamin E acetate and level 1 pesticide testing with action levels, specific action levels. So I see some hands from the committee before we go back to the public comment. Committee Member Yu.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just have a clarifying question to your motion, and this might speak to the ash question as well. In the motion mentions level 1 pesticides and vitamin E acetate. Can the Bureau or state departments in real time update, this list of what's needed to be tested on an ongoing basis if there's like suspected or proven harmful impacts? Or does this need to go through, like the committee process, regulatory or statutory process?
Well, I think emergency regs are in order when it's for public safety, but I would defer to our legal counsel on some of that. So.
Hi, this is Angela McIntyre, BCC Legal. That's something that the Bureau could look at publishing.
So if I'm understanding correctly, if needed, the Bureau could publish additional, chemicals or additives or anything to be tested for.
Correct. As Chair Farrow noted, the Bureau has the ability to adopt emergency regulations in response to things that are deemed an emergency.
Great, thank you. I'm good with the motion then, Chair Farrow.
Thank you. Thank you. Member Nevedal. Member Nevedal, did you have your hand raised in air?
My apologies. Thank you for, I did not press mute or unmute. So I was saying, this is Member Nevedal, and I do think I can support this motion with some clarification, hopefully. Vitamin E acetate might be appropriate, as noted, for food and or topical products. So depending on the form of the product tested, setting a solvent threshold of no vitamin E acetate may impact other product lines. And I think the intention here is to capture inhaled products. So I am wondering if the chair and Member Cermak would be open to potentially rephrasing this to ensure that the vitamin E acetate, the solvent, is in reference to inhaled products.
I'm trying to figure out if maybe we can do it in a different way that says that.
Well, let me just explain a little bit.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying, but what I'm trying to do is they're bunching them up. There could be other solvents that, whether inhaled or not, if they're not being tested for, we may miss out their. So I could sit there and say that I could clarify that it be looked at the purpose of the form the cannabis product is presented to the public or something like that, and allow some flexibility to determine if in fact vitamin E acetate in an edible or a topical would not be hazardous, then just because it's tested for does not mean it's excluded, something like that.
Correct. Chair Farrow, possibly it's reflecting on product categories. So I think this is also valid for action level, so that the regulatory agency can start setting level 1 action levels and solvent thresholds, including solvent thresholds for vitamin E acetate as appropriate for product categories, or for the product category. I might not have the exact nomenclature, but referencing back to our discussion in August that these thresholds should be set according to
product category.
How the products are used, potentially.
Right. So let me think about this. Dr. Cermak, since you made the second, is there any, before we try to re-tackle this to address some very valid points that are being made by committee member Nevedal, do you have any thoughts, having been in public health?
Thank you very much. For some reason, my entire screen starts saying, whoops, I'm using an unsupported browser, and I can't mute and unmute and raise my hand or anything. So I appreciate you unmuted here. I think that it would be possible to say vitamin E acetate in relationship to vape products. And that's really what we are concerned, or inhaled products. That's what we're concerned about. We're not concerned about it in topicals. So if you just added that, it might take care of things.
And would that be good to the point that you raised, Ms. Nevedal?
Sorry, this is Member Nevedal, and that would address my concern. I mean, I could support the motion with that. Yeah, thank you for keeping it simple.
So since we've had a lot of discussion, could I get a readback of the final version that we had a motion and second, so I can find the appropriate way to modify?
The motion is that the agency set regulations to ensure that all cannabis goods are tested for solvents, including vitamin E acetate, as well as set action levels for all level 1 pesticides or any in the testing process.
So if I were to say for vitamin E acetate and solvents in inhaled products and level 1 pesticides in all cannabis products, those action items may be different depending upon the product form being tested. Could that deal with, because I think what Member Nevedal was trying to say is that there may be even some pesticides at a lower level that are fine if they're a topical, but may not be fine at that level as an inhalable or concentrate. Nevedal?
That is what I was referencing, yes. But I think that there's two pieces to this, right? So there's a clear desire to ensure that inhalable products are tested for vitamin E acetate. And so the first part of your motion has language that says all cannabis goods. And I think then you reference vitamin E acetate. So potentially the motion might be able to be simplified and clarified by instead of saying all cannabis goods, that inhaled concentrated cannabis goods, right? Because these are what are vaporized, be tested for vitamin E acetate, or however that wording is. And then the second part, I don't know that would, I think you could just leave it as is in my reading, because I don't think that first part sets or dictates any inability to set level 1 actions per product type.
Okay. I thought my motion was to test for it, but not that they would necessarily, so they would test for everything. That was all solvents, whether it's consumable through ingestion or inhalation or absorption. So they would test for all of them. And depending on the form, it would be either inappropriate or unpermitted based upon the agency's determination in inhalable goods, and that the same be tested. But if you think it would be more simple, I'm happy to modify it to say that.
Well, listen, let me just say this too. If that is your intention, that the thresholds be set based on the type of product, then you might be able to just tack that intention onto the end of your motion, right? If you want all goods to be tested for vitamin E acetate and you want action levels set, then I think you could tack a statement onto the end saying that, and thresholds be set based on product type or use of product type.
And the reason I think that's important is that I think if we have testing labs that are going to be buying the equipment to be able to test all of these things, then we should be checking, we shouldn't have them to have to set up differently if they just test for it. Then the determination on the printout based on the final form of the product, if it's an inhaled goods, it would be canceled out. If it was a non-inhaled good, if it met a threshold that was set, it could be permissive. That's kind of my thought. So once again, do you want to read back the motion and then we can just say, and then go ahead.
So the motion I have is that the agency set regulations to ensure that inhaled concentrated cannabis goods are tested for vitamin E solvents and establishing action levels for all level 1 pesticides in the testing process. And then before you move on, I'd just like to ask the moderator to unmute committee member Cermak just to make sure that this is in line with him being the second. I know he has some comments.
Am I unmuted?
You are.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yes, that's in line with what I meant. It's needs to be, the vitamin E acetate has to be tested for appropriate products. Really, it doesn't need to be tested for topicals. So I'm comfortable with that.
Well, then let's. And are you fine with that, Committee Member Nevedal?
Committee Member Nevedal here. Yes, thank you very much. Sorry for the time slot. Thank you.
No, it isn't that. This is very important. This is, again, as many people have said, we're here under the Department of Consumer Affairs for consumers. And this is the one place where very clearly, if there are foreign substances in these products, which are health products and are generally good for you, we can hurt people. So let's make sure we get this one right. So I'm happy to take the time. So thank you. All right. That said, do we have any member comments before we go back to the public? Member Baboulian.
Oh, yes. On this motion, I'm in support of it. Anything that protects the end user consumer, and obviously we know that vitamin E acetate when vape is harmful. But I do want to remind everybody that through the vaping crisis, it was all traced back to the black market. None of the people that were sick or died from it purchased their product from the legal supply chain or the licensed dispensaries. So just to be mindful, then the reason I bring that up is that was a real-time testing of the licensed supply chain and the licensed industry in California and everywhere else in the country. And the testing requirements that were there were sufficient enough to prevent anybody from becoming sick or dying as a result of purchasing from a licensing. So I just want to make sure that when we talk about the stuff, everything has appropriate context to it. That said, understanding that vitamin E, when vaporized, does cause harm, that does cause death. I think this is a really great motion to add to it. But again, kind of like was just discussed, we also have to apply all these different things, not just this, but a lot of the testing stuff to the appropriate category of products.
I appreciate that, Committee Member Bulboulian, but I do think it also offers one more piece in the weapons for our enforcement agencies to go after this illegal market that's putting such a burden on our legal market. So one more thing, if it's clear that it's not permitted and we go after them because it's in our regs, then we have one more thing to go after the illegal market on.
I agree 100%. I agree 100% with that. We do know about it now, so it's very appropriate to include it now in the additional arsenal. But when we were discussing it and talking about one thing and applying it to something else, that's what I want to bring up. And it's not just on this specifically, but.
Thank you very much. Any other members' comments? Seeing none, Moderator, would you be so kind as to open the public comment on the motion and second for discussion?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. Please be advised we are only taking public comments on the agenda item currently being discussed. You will be provided 1 minute to speak and given a 20-second warning. Our first public comment comes from Shannon Swatek. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, my name is Shannon Swatek, and I helped write some of the first laboratory legislation in Oregon, and I also wrote some of the sub-regulatory guidance in Massachusetts. And I just spoke with a lab director friend of mine in Michigan, and I wanted to address Mr. Bullybun's comment about how it all came from the black market, and the data coming out of Michigan is showing that there is a decent amount of vitamin E acetate still in the legal market, and there's some bad actors out there still. So I strongly encourage you to look at the data from Michigan to see that we really do need to test for this if it's out there. Thank you.
Our next public comment comes from an individual identified as William Purnell. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. Appreciate the discussion on this, and I think it's clear that there's a lot of interest in protecting the public. And I would really encourage you, even with all this discussion, to table this item until you've had an opportunity to hear from subject matter experts with public health, hazmat, and scientists. You've got Dr. Merard Gabriel, a senior ecologist at the Integral Ecology Research Center, who can talk to you about some of these chemicals that are poisoning our public lands and wildlife, and from the marijuana grows, the illegal ones. One of those chemicals called carbofuran. The other thing I would just encourage you to look at, action levels, pass or fail. Some of these chemical pesticides are so poisonous. Are we going to be accepting a trace amount?
20 seconds.
So with these chemicals that are so poisonous, so dangerous, is it going to be acceptable to have small amounts in the marijuana supply if we have pass or fails on levels? And I also encourage you to look at butane hash oil, solvents, and the harm that's coming from those and the explosions and fires, and testing for those products as well. Thank you.
I would like to. I was going to pause for a moment for you to give your brief statement.
This is the co-moderator. I just want for the public commenters to let them know that we are taking public comment on the motion, which is the agency set regulations to ensure that inhaled concentrated cannabis goods are tested for vitamin E solvents and establishing action levels for all level 1 pesticides in the testing process.
With that, our next public comment comes from Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you, committee. I want to speak strongly in favor of the motion. as a longtime patient myself and a longtime provider of medical preparations to patients whose, in many cases, lives are being saved by these preparations. Testing is really essential. It's how we understand what we're offering to these folks. So please vote yes for this motion. Thank you.
Next, we have Dylan Burns. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you for your, I'd like to,
Dylan, you are unmuted.
can you hear me?
We can. We can.
Okay, perfect. I'd like to support the motion being proposed with additional modifications in the way of vitamin E and other solvents being tested. Commissioner or commenter Bobulian is correct in that the vitamin E crisis was really with the black market. My lab did an extensive investigation in both legal market and black market products. Definitely saw vitamin E almost only in black market products, but it is something to be monitored, as well as other diluents like propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, and currently, or what's been being used recently, is wood pine tar. In the black market, the whole point is to boost their bottom dollar, use small amount of distillate and make it look the same by adding in these diluents to make it look similar but very low THC. So other diluents are important to be monitored also.
Next, we have Paul and Susan Hansberry and Tibbin. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, this is Paul Hansberry, Lovingly and Legally. I strongly support this. I think that the operative thing here is that the action levels and that it includes the product type. So that's a really good caveat important caveat to put in. With regards to the ash, I heard that they were saying that they have the ability to make regulations, emergency regulations, but not that they were going to. And so that was sort of lifted up in the air. I don't know what I'm fuzzy on what actually happened with the issue around the ash from the fires. On that, I'll say thank you for all of your hard work.
Good afternoon, Susan Tibbin. I support the motion. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Victoria Basso. I do want to make a quick reminder statement that we are only allowing one comment per public member attendee per each agenda item. So if you have already spoken once for this agenda item, please note that your second request will be dismissed. Victoria, your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, this is Victoria Basso from Pride Analytics. I just wanted to make note that action limits for microbial contaminants in cannabis are much lower than they are in the food and agricultural industries. And I believe we need to take a better look at this across product types. It is causing undue loss of batches for distributors, in addition to the lack of standardization of microbial impurities testing within labs.
Next, we have Bobby Jones. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I'm in favor and vote yes. I think also the department is funding R&D to find more testing and to help the industry. Also brings jobs, boosts the economy. So I think maybe a better testing label for the products. I love the debate on the cream and inhale. I think the cream should have more research, and I think the bad actors have to be closed down as damaging.
This is the co-moderator. I just want to make sure that the public attendees are understanding that the public comment is on the motion that agencies set regulations to ensure that inhaled concentrated cannabis goods are tested for vitamin E solvents and establishing action levels for all level 1 pesticides in the testing process. That is the motion on which we are accepting public comment at this time.
Next, we have Eddie Franco. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, committee. Eddie Franco, Legislative Liaison with the California Cannabis Industry Association, speaking in support of this motion, particularly the part about action levels for Category 1 pesticides. We believe there needs to be specific action levels for all compounds and contaminants that are required to be tested under state law, including Category 1 pesticides. This is going to lead to greater standardization and less variation among the testing labs. Thanks so much for this motion.
Next up, we have Marnie Berger. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi. So extracts and flowers are different. Flowers are inhalable. They can be, and extracts can be inhalable. But flowers don't need to be tested for vitamin E acetate. So that shouldn't be another cost passed on to the small grower. I think that a lot of this should be deferred to scientists. There's already an enormous list of 900 things that can't be inside of the products tested. You know, there's never been a death in cannabis in 10,000 years. Tobacco kills people, it's legal. Alcohol kills people, it's legal. So, and is it at the beginning or is it in the final form that you want the testing to happen? A lot more needs to go into this. Thank you.
Next, we have Casey Strang. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I support this motion. And we do so because vitamin E acetate is found in permitted products from permitted businesses. That's been reported all over the news and mentioned before in this meeting. It's important that the public knows that vitamin E acetate can be found from permitted businesses. And to say that it isn't is really not helpful. It's actually very hurtful to public health messaging. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Joanna Cedar. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. I speak in favor of the motion, the most important part of which is the differentiation of action levels based upon the method of consumption. I also agree with Victoria's comments about research and development of more parity with other agricultural crops and products, their processes, and action levels. Thank you.
Next, we have Jason Sarouche. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Members of the committee, my name is Jason Sarouche from the Getting It Right from the Start project at the Public Health Institute. I'd like to say that the motion language should be slightly changed. If I heard correctly, it said testing for vitamin E solvents, but to my knowledge, the vitamin E acetate isn't used as a solvent. It's an excipient used similarly to propylene glycol. So I think it should be clear to say that the testing is for vitamin E acetate, not vitamin E solvents. Also, I support the test being solely for cannabis products intended for inhalation, which should exclude flowers by definition. And lastly, we should look at the fact that additives are being allowed to be put into these cannabis products intended for inhalation before their safety profile when inhaled is researched. So placing preventative measures would have more control over what can be added to cannabis products intended for inhalation and would help offset the need for additional testing like this. Thank you.
Next, we have an individual identified as Max. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Great, thank you. Max McAlonis on behalf of Flow Cannabis Company. In support of the motion, we appreciate the clarification of the motion made by the chair and the comments by committee member Nevedal that vitamin E acetate and other additives are issues specific to manufactured inhalable products. these additives such as propylene glycol, polyethylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, and medium chain triglyceride or MCT oil may be appropriate for non-inhalable products. MCT oil, or commonly known as coconut oil, is an example, is appropriate for tinctures or topicals, but not inhalables. Thank you for your time.
At this time, we have received no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please.
This feature has been closed.
Thank you, moderator. So we have a motion and second, some good debate and comment. I open this up for a roll call vote.
Before that, can I have the moderator please unmute committee member Cermak just to make sure that he doesn't have any additional comments before we move for vote? Committee member Cermak, you are unmuted.
Well, thank you. The only comment is that I believe there's a comma between the vitamin E and the word solvents. So it wasn't vitamin E solvents. I believe there's a comma.
And that's correct. I said other solvents, but that did it sufficiently.
So at this time, I will restate the motion, which is that the agency set regulations to ensure that inhaled concentrated cannabis goods are tested for vitamin E, solvents, and establishing action levels for all level 1 pesticides in the testing process. And with that, I will go to Babulian.
Aye.
Cermak.
Aye.
Thank you. Sarah.
Aye.
Adeback.
Aye.
Harada.
Aye.
Huffman.
Aye.
Lynch.
Aye.
Nebdal.
Aye.
Heck.
Aye.
Stevenson.
Aye.
Woolsey.
Aye.
Wu.
Aye.
And you.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Very good. So let's move on to item B of agenda item 6. Item B is related to the testing of non-cannabis goods. The question for the advisory committee: should licensed testing laboratories be allowed to test non-cannabis goods? Current law, Business Professions Code, Section 2600, Subdivision AT, defines a testing laboratory as a laboratory, facility, or entity in the state that offers or performs testing or tests of cannabis goods, and that is both accredited by an accrediting body that is independent from all other persons involved in commercial cannabis activity in the state, and licensed by the Bureau. The Business Profession Code, Section 26104, allows licensed testing laboratories to receive and test samples of cannabis goods from a qualified patient or primary caregiver with a valid physician's recommendation for cannabis for medicinal purposes, or from a person over 21 when the cannabis has been grown by that person and will be used solely for his or her personal use. Testing for these samples are not to be certified for resale or transfer to other person or licensee. Considerations: provisions of MCRSA for testing related to the testing of cannabis goods, including flower, pre-rolls, edibles, tinctures, concentrates, and other items containing cannabis. Any testing of non-cannabis goods would need to be structured in a way that will not compromise the regulatory compliance testing and still ensure that the protections of the public is at the highest level as mandated by MCRSA. So with that, I open this subject up to the committee for comments. Oh, excuse me. Before we open up to the committee, we're going to take a 5-minute break for individuals to take care of personal needs. So we'll be back at 3:20.
I have to.
Is still with us from the committee, put their hand button on for a second, and we will open the mic for Dr. Cermak since he's having computer issues, and we'll verify that we are all up back. How's that?
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cermak. Very good. Looks like we've got a quorum. So we've recently gone through, excuse me, I don't have a quorum.
This is the BCC, this is the co-moderator. Can I have all committee members, just the committee members, please raise your hands one more time, and please do not lower them until I have made sure a quorum has been established. Thank you. The quorum has been established.
Okay, let's try this again. So we are on agenda item 6B, testing of non-cannabis goods. Are there any committee members that wish to make comment? Vice Chair Heidelbach, I recognize you.
Thank you, Chair Farrell. I'm just curious if someone could explain to me what this covers exactly. I mean, are we just talking about someone off the street having something tested? What are we talking about when we are talking about testing of non-cannabis goods for laboratories?
That's a good question. I guess is there somebody, I keep getting echo. It's interesting because it reads initially like it's going to be non-cannabis goods, but then it talks about individual persons growing or growing for a patient and being tested, but those would be cannabis goods.
Hi, this is Angela McIntyre, BCC Legal. I just wanted to clarify that we include section 26104 of the Business and Professions Code to clarify whom a testing laboratory may test cannabis on behalf of.
So to clarify, does this mean that if someone wanted to have a testing laboratory expand with I mean, if they wanted to test strawberries that they're growing, what exactly? I'm just trying to seek clarification so we know exactly what we're tackling here. It's not clear.
I think that's the intent, is for us to consider whether, you know, if a testing lab feels it has the capacity to go outside of the requirements of simply testing cannabis or cannabis for homegrown products, the current law would not permit such testing by a certified lab. Part of that reasoning was there was worry that testing other products could contaminate cannabis products. And so I think if we want to permit cannabis labs to test other products, whether that's hops in beer or something else, then we would have to make a regulatory change. I don't know if anybody on this committee has been involved, but I see plenty of hands. So why don't we ask some of them, and maybe they have an idea of what this is about. Ms. Lynch, Committee Member Lynch, I believe your hand was up first.
Sorry, that was a holdover from roll call.
Committee Member Nevedal, is you wish to speak to this topic?
Yes, please. This is Committee Member Nevedal. I think there might be a couple of things here. Regarding who can receive testing of cannabis goods, it seems like there has been some question about clear regulations about whether or not law enforcement and regulatory bodies could have cannabis labs test cannabis goods for, say, quality or impurities or contamination, or any number of other things that cannabis labs test for. And then I think the other piece here too is we heard some public comment about potential contamination coming from ingredients such as chocolate. And it's my understanding that a licensed manufacturer would not be able to submit a sample of chocolate to their testing laboratory, their cannabis testing laboratory, to see if that would potentially impact their final COA on their batch. So I think the reference to non-cannabis goods potentially is whether or not a licensed entity could submit other portions or ingredients for quality assurance testing.
That's helpful. Thank you, Member Nevedal.
And Committee Member Woolsey, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. My question is related to how would a change allowing them to test non-cannabis goods benefit public safety, or does it only benefit the lab by expanding their business interests?
This is the co-moderator. Can I ask the moderator to please unmute Committee Member Cermak? He has a comment.
Thank you very much. I'm really very much in favor of permitting laboratories to have other facets of business. They could get into doing testing for other agricultural products, other food products, which would enable them to do two things. It would enable them to enlarge their enterprise if they wished, and that would provide them actually with a wider array of tools and instruments that could eventually be used at lower cost if it was felt that that would be useful in their work with cannabis. Plus, I think that it would put them in a position where they're not completely beholden to the cannabis industry. And that would remove conflicts of interest and put them in a better, I think, in some ways, more objective position. So I'm actually in favor of them since they're quite capable of being very careful in the work that they do, of being able to open up other facets of testing business for other industries.
Thank you, Dr. Cermak. One thing I might say is, Committee Member Nevedal raised it with the chocolates. I mean, we've talked about different levels of different things. The state has a different permissive amount of heavy metals in chocolates for chocolate consumption, but they have a lower threshold for heavy metals than they do traditionally for cannabis chocolate consumption. And the last thing I think we want to do is put a product in final form for testing and have that product fail, but the producer has a significant amount of chocolate that may have caused that failure, and encourage, based upon this sunk cost that they have, to try to find a way to get that chocolate on the market in another way, maybe without testing. So I think it could be a public safety issue in addition to a cost issue, which, that licensed retailer could throw it all away, and as a result, the cost of goods sold would go up, which would greater the difference in, you know, their product cost at the market versus that from the illegal market that isn't worrying about such a thing. So we can look at it on a very narrow level, or we can look at it all the potential ways that if they aren't allowed to test. I'm not sure about the other stuff, testing wines, testing beers, testing that. But I do think there is a way that allowing testing of other products might be helpful in the industry.
Chair, you are muted, but before that, I just want the moderator to just make sure, committee member Cermak, do you have any additional comments that you want to make before chair moves for public comment?
Thank you very much. I move that testing laboratories, that the restriction on testing laboratories to cannabis-only products be lifted, be ended.
Do we have a second?
This is Committee Member Nevedal. I will second Committee Member Cermak's motion.
We have a motion and a second. Can we open the Q&A section and allow for public comment, moderator?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please submit your request and we will take them in the order they are received. Just a reminder that we are only taking public comment on agenda item 6B and the motion that was just put forth. Only
restate the motion.
Absolutely.
So the motion is that the restriction of testing laboratories, testing only cannabis products be lifted.
Thank you. And once again, we will only be taking one comment per member of the public. First up, we do have Eddie Franco. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you, committee members. Eddie Franco, Legislative Liaison with California Cannabis Industry Association. I'll try to keep my comments brief. Our full asks are detailed in writing and submitted to you all. One, I want to detail particularly reasons why we think that labs should be allowed to test things outside of just cannabis, just for the edification of some committee members. First, one reason would be being allowed to test hemp-derived products, particularly hemp-derived CBD products. We've seen that outside of the wake of the 2018 federal farm bill, we're seeing more hemp-derived products on the market that aren't necessarily cannabis products, so labs should be allowed to test those as they are the best equipped in the state to be able to test those to the degree of health and safety that California wants. Another reason would be for emergency relief. Coming out of a very unprecedented year, labs should be able to, for example, test non-cannabis biomaterials and soils that cultivation licensees are being affected by wildfires, or be able to assist in COVID testing. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Paul and Susan Hansberry and Tibbin. Your microphone is unmuted.
Yes, hi, this is Paul Hansberry. Thank you very much. I strongly support the motion. I think it's imperative. First of all, it just makes common sense. It just makes sense to be able to do that so people can test the ingredients for the products for edibles. It helps to normalize the cannabis, which is something that we have been working very hard to do. A number of people have been working very hard to do. And early on during the pandemic, I was looking into different ways and suggesting ways that they might be able to help with the COVID testing, with the overabundance of testing that was necessary.
20 seconds.
Along with veterinary testing. So I fully support this and hope that the Bureau does take up your recommendation. Thank you very much.
Our next public comment comes from Dylan Burns. Your microphone has been unmuted.
My name is Dylan Burns with Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs in San Diego. I'm the lab manager here at the testing lab, and I'm a little confused by this agenda item. To my knowledge, there's nothing in the regulations barring testing labs from testing non-cannabis items, and from what I understand, it's very commonplace in the testing industry. And to be honest, companies should be doing that exactly like you guys are saying. Chocolate can have pesticides. It's not regulated to the same degree. Any raw ingredient can have pesticides because it's not regulated by the Bureau of Cannabis Control. So companies should be doing that. So I'm a little confused. I'd like some clarification from
20 seconds.
BCC Legal about what the actual point of this agenda item is. It for the metric uploads of raw ingredients? I'm assuming that's what this is regarding, because current regulation says nothing barring testing labs from testing non-cannabis goods. Thank you.
Next, we have Jason Sarouche. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Members of the committee, my name is Jason Sarouche from the Public Health Institute. I'm commenting in support of allowing cannabis testing laboratories to also test non-cannabis products for two main reasons. One, if the lab relies solely on the cannabis industry to keep their doors open, this creates a system riddled with conflicts of interest. If a licensee has a product fail at one lab, they can take the next batch of the product somewhere else to get tested. This results in a system where labs are incentivized to pass, not to fail products. Lab shopping was an issue long before Proposition 64 passed, and it continues to be an issue in California, as well as many other states. The second reason is because laboratory methods, while they are constantly evolving, we want veteran analytical chemists developing these methods and testing these products. But to ask for them to give up their old work and set up new labs to solely test cannabis products is a major barrier to entry. So requiring cannabis testing labs to be limited to testing cannabis products excludes a lot of traditional chemists from the industry. And we want the best minds helping guide this industry forward. So thank you for your time.
Next, we have Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, Wade Laughter, House of Harlequin. I'm strongly in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Next, we have Lynn Silver. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you, Lynn Silver from the Public Health Institute. I think first, given what's been said, I would ask if the council could clarify if a requirement for specialization actually exists or not. If it does not, then perhaps we don't need the motion. If it does, or if it's being considered, then I would strongly support Dr. Chermak's motion that there should be no such requirement for specialization, so that labs will not necessarily be beholden just to the cannabis industry and can engage in a broader range of analytic activities. Thank you.
Next, we have Shannon Swatik. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, this is Shannon Swatik, and I want to echo my support. Well, actually, my question about whether this is prohibited and my support for the motion, because the point of sale testing is not capturing all the risk in this industry. For the committee member that asked whether we were going to improve public health and safety by allowing cannabis labs to test non-cannabis products, we are moving towards a federal landscape. And if I could go back and redid what I did in Oregon and Massachusetts, I would definitely have implemented more GMP type testing. And GMP type testing includes surface swabs and critical control point testing and source material testing, which sometimes, as we mentioned with the chocolate, is not going to be cannabis containing. But I also think that the best labs I've audited all over the country for ISO 17025 are doing this type of testing to help their license holders understand why their action limits are failing. They are testing the sheetrock to find out legacy pesticides from people who grew in there before, and they are testing soil to find out if that soil also has legacy.
Time had been reached.
Hi, this is the co-moderator. I just want to make clear that the agency and the committee cannot answer any questions that are provided during public comment. If you do have a question or anything about the motion or you need clarification, you are more than welcome to send that question into the Bureau at their email address at bcc@dca.ca.gov. But the committee and agency staff cannot answer any questions that are provided at public comment.
Thank you, co-moderator. As a reminder for members of the public, we are only taking one comment per member of the public. So if you have already had an opportunity to speak for this agenda item, please do not speak again. Thank you. Next up, we have an individual identified as William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you. And I support this motion and echo what other speakers have said about branching out a little bit for these labs so that they're not beholden to the cannabis industry. The only two concerns I have, and hopefully it'll come up with the committee member in the discussion here, is lab capacity. I heard either at this conference or yesterday that there was a shortage of testing capacity in the state, or at the Cannabis Control conference that we just had in September here. So if there's a lab capacity issue by branching out, is this the right time, and does it reduce that capacity to test if there's currently a shortage? And then the other concern would just be the regulation of the license footprint for a cannabis testing lab versus
20 seconds.
Versus now a lab that's testing other products. Does that create any challenges with regulation and inspection by the BCC or other agencies of that footprint if it's now expanded into other areas? Thank you very much.
Next, we have an individual identified as Victoria Basso. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, this is Victoria from Pride Analytics. We completely agree with this motion and actually stand in support of Dylan Burns' comments and Shannon's comments. Labs are already doing this. We are testing growing mediums. We're testing cartridges. We are testing non-cannabis goods in support of the cannabis industry, and anything else that we could possibly bring into the lab honestly does nothing but help our assays and better understanding of matrices. So I think it's very good that cannabis labs work with non-cannabis goods to test them.
Next, we have Antoinette Duncan. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, this is Antoinette Duncan with CannaSafe Labs. If testing of non-cannabis products is prohibited, I want to express my full support of this motion. Labs already have very specific segregation practices to prevent cross-contamination, so I don't believe that this should be a concern of the committee. Adding more matrices or product types should not detract from that, since cannabis labs already test many different matrix types. Labs also often see contaminants introduced through non-cannabis raw materials rather than the cannabis product itself. Therefore, it is important for labs to be able to test these non-cannabis raw materials for troubleshooting purposes. Thank you.
Next, we have Joanna Cedar. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you very much. I'm in support of the motion. Any lab accredited according to ISO 17025 2017 standards should be able to test pretty much whatever they want, because there are very strict and stringent requirements in order to receive that accreditation. That accreditation also requires that labs continually look for and correct mistakes among their own processes. So I would encourage the committee to ask the regulatory agencies to allow more of that process with regard to testing cannabis. Thank you.
Next, we have an individual identified as Marnie Berger. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi there. I believe that testing should be available for permitted and non-permitted cannabis. So the mom and pop place that may live near an agricultural area and they're afraid of overspray or something, they should be able to test their cannabis without having to have a license. Thank you.
At this time, we have received no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please, moderator.
Feature has been closed.
So we are still in a quorum. We have a motion and a second. I'd like to call for the question after our co-moderator reads back the motion.
So the motion that I have is that the restriction of testing laboratories testing only cannabis products be lifted, and I will ask the moderator to please unmute Committee Member Cermak to make sure that I have his motion correct.
Correct.
Thank you. With that, I will move to the vote. Bullion?
Aye.
Did you say aye?
Yes, ma'am. Aye.
Thank you. Cermak?
Aye.
Farrow?
Aye.
Heidelbach?
Aye.
Harada?
Aye.
Lynch?
Aye.
Nevlo?
Aye.
Peck?
Aye.
Stevenson? Woolsey?
Aye.
Stevenson, aye.
Wu?
Aye.
And you? Motion passes.
Very good. Thank you for all the hard work on that one. Two unanimouses in a row. We're setting a trend now. So let's move to agenda item number 7. And this will be our last agenda item for the day, as we've already done agenda items 8 and 9. And that agenda item reads as, looking for the background on agenda item. Carry over from last time. Okay. This is a continuation from our last committee meetings in August. August. And Dr. Cermak, do you want to lead on this question, since this was one that you asked for us to continue on?
Thank you very much. I move that CDPH request and support the Office of the President of the University of California to convene an expert scientific task force exempt from conflicts of interest to review the scientific literature on the issue of increasingly high potency THC content of cannabis and cannabis products. Also, the state of the science on health implications of increasing potency, for example, but not limited to dependency, mental health, drug driving. And finally, to present a summary of the scientific data and to make public and to, present a summary of the scientific data and make public health recommendations to cannabis regulatory agencies and to the public. This is all about getting data. It's the data we need to really be able to understand if the high potency, particularly the high potency minus CBD, is healthy enough that we feel comfortable providing products that are of such high potency. And the data is out there. We need to find a way to get it. Thank you.
So we have a motion, and it was fairly long. Do we have it captured in writing? Do we have a second to that motion?
This is Lynch. I second.
Thank you, Committee Member Lynch. So we have a motion and a second. I will ask the moderator to open the question and answer. Oh, excuse me. I have a committee member that wishes to ask a question first before we open up to public comment. Committee Member Nevedal, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, hello, this is Committee Member Nevedal. I appreciate the intent of the motion, but I do have concerns that the intent could not be realized if there was not also an analysis of the potential benefits of high THC consumption and high THC products. I do suspect that there are a number of patients that actually rely on such products in multiple forms. So I wouldn't want to not count that in this discussion should there be research and data going forward. Thank you.
Committee Member Yu, I see that your hand is raised.
Just a question for clarification purposes. What would be the definition of or the threshold for high THC?
This is the co-moderator. I would ask the moderator to please unmute Dr. Cermak so that he can provide his response and additional comments.
Thank you very much. That's precisely the question. And that's what the data will be very useful for being able to help us decide whether or not there is a point at which increasing difficulties or increasing benefits begin happening. So I would also, in response to Committee Member Nevedal, I'd be willing to accept an amendment that would put in to that list that I had when I said dependency, mental health, drug driving, and I would be willing to put in and health benefits.
Would our second be willing to accept that? And would that meet the concerns of Committee Member Nevedal?
This is Lynch. Just raising that would still get me a second.
Very good.
And Committee Member Nevedal, my apologies for interrupting earlier. That I appreciate that. Thank you. That would address my concerns.
Very good. So we have a amended motion and a second. Seeing no other hands at this point, I would ask the moderator again to open the Q&A section for public comment. Thank you.
You're very welcome. This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened the Q&A panel. Please submit your request to make public comments, and please keep in mind that we are only taking comments on agenda item number 7. In just a moment, the co-moderator will restate the question. Co-moderator, if you could restate.
Yes, so the motion I have is CDPH request and support the Office of the President of the University of California to convene on an expert scientific task force exempt from conflicts of interest to review the scientific literature on the issue of increasingly high potency THC content of cannabis and cannabis products, the state of the science on health implications of increasing potency, for example, but without limitation, upon dependency, mental health, health benefits, and drug driving, present a summary of the scientific data, and make public health recommendations to cannabis regulatory agencies and to the public. And I would ask the moderator to please unmute Dr. Committee Member Cermak just to make sure I have that correct.
Absolutely astounding. Yes, you got it correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, our first public comment comes from Charles Pappas. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, again, Berkeley Cannabis Commission, Divinity Tweed in San Francisco, and 53-year cannabis user. This is a complete solution in search of a problem. The problem is alcoholic use. The problem is drug abuse. You know, the Bureau is to regulate the legal use of cannabis and distribution, not to find things wrong with it, which is what many in the health communities are looking for. Keep the kids away from it. Don't let people do it. It's not a harmful drug. You shouldn't waste our money on that. Thank you.
And Mr. Pappas, if you wouldn't mind lowering your hand as well. Next up, we have Paul Hansberry and Susan Tippin. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hello, thank you. This is Paul Hansberry, Lovingly and Legally. It seems to me that this is kind of redundant. Isn't there in statute that the UC system is charged with developing and doing research, and they're the only people that can do the research in the state of California for just these things, for impairment, and certain amount of money is sent to CHP for impairment for drunk driving, and so all these things are already addressed by statute. But then further to Member Nevedal's issue, the difference between medical and the people that need this and the benefits for them would far outweigh the potential abuses that someone might come up with. So I think we should leave it to the people that are already doing the research.
Time had been reached. Our next public comment comes from Wade Laughter. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cermak and others who have amended your original proposal to include the idea of the benefits of cannabis. So much of the research over the years has been to prove how bad it is and how harmful it is and how destructive it is. It is none of those things. And I think that particularly in Spain and in Israel, there's a lot of very interesting research happening that does point to benefits of high doses of THC and THCA. Thank you.
Our next public comment is from William Perno. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Cermak, for this motion. I agree with you 100%. Today's THC in cannabis is very different than cannabis from just a few years ago, and certainly from cannabis when a lot of parents were teenagers. We really need to be looking at harmful effects from high-potency THC. Emergency room doctors are seeing patients coming in with chest pain, all kinds of other issues coming out, mental health effects from it, cannabinoid hyperemesis, and high-potency THC could be at the heart of a lot of those harmful effects. And really looking at our young people age 18 to
20 seconds.
And the risks for addiction and dependency for a person with a developing brain up until age 25 are so critical. So thank you so much. I fully support this motion and hope the research takes place. Thank you.
Next, we have Glenda Driver. Your microphone has been unmuted.
In a recent workshop with the FDA, the collaborative is asking the same question. What is the potency with regards to consumption, and how does it impact us in our everyday lives? Let me say this. We have a real issue with the growing issue of potency. And it's used in cannabis because it can get up to 80%. So what is the safety measures that we need to put in place as we move to this higher
20 seconds.
And consumption? I thank you very much.
Next, we have Jason Sarouche. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Members of the committee, my name is Jason Sarouche from the Public Health Institute. I am commenting in full support of this motion as amended. This is a fundamental step to ensure that California's cannabis policies are evidence-based. Thank you.
Next, we have Sarah Armstrong. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Affairs for Americans for Safe Access. My name is Sarah Armstrong. I would like to urge the body to understand that CBD is not tested either at the federal or the state level, so any investigation into high potency may be contaminated by the fact that what's really being tested is the pesticide in the product. Patients really do need a wide variety of doses.
This is the BCC, this is the co-moderator, and I just want to make sure attendees are understanding that we are only taking public comment at this time on the motion. I will go ahead and read the motion one more time so that everybody knows what we're discussing. The motion is that CDPH request and support the Office of the President of the University of California to convene an expert scientific task force exempt from conflicts of interest to review the scientific literature on the issue of increasingly high potency THC content of cannabis and cannabis products, the state of the science on health implications of increasing potency, for example, but without limitation, upon dependency, mental health, drug driving, and health benefits, present a summary of the scientific data, and make public health recommendations to cannabis regulatory agencies and to the public. And that is the motion that we are taking public comment on at this time.
With that, I will go ahead and allow Sarah Armstrong to continue her comments. You are unmuted.
I would just like to say that studying high dependency needs to include patients who are very ill and may need these high dosages. I don't know exactly how you would conduct that study. I'm sure some people have some good ideas. It is also very important to remember that there may not be that many American studies on high potency. I looked very. If that's the case, maybe you might want to recommend also that the UC system have a specific study. Right now they're handing out the grants. This might be a good area.
10 seconds. Next, we have Marnie Berger. Your microphone has been unmuted.
Hi, there's no drunk driving with THC because you're not drunk. Drunk is alcohol, and it is not addictive. There are many cannabinoids that are healing, and it's not just THC. And one must consider the entire entourage effect, and that's the whole plant. There really isn't research in the US because it's not federally legal. Please don't micromanage dosing for patients. You don't need to regulate milligrams. There are patients that use 1,000, 2,000, up to 5,000 milligrams a day because it keeps them alive. Here are some benefits of THC: anti-anxiety, anti-inflammatory, antidepressant, antioxidant, anti-pain, inhibits cell growth in cancer. It protects the nervous system. It's a cardiac protectant. It's a neuroprotectant. It promotes bone growth. It reduces immune system issues. There's analgesic benefits. That's what high THC does. Thank you.
There she is. Our next public comment comes from Joanna Cedar. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. I'm going to agree with Mr. Pappas that this motion reflects a solution in search of a problem. Mr. Hansberry, that these are activities already mandated in statute, and Mr. Laughter about the positives of cannabinoid products, some of which must be very high dose for specific patients. Whereas cannabinoid science is limited in some areas, there is one thing that the science already tells us, that people do not react to cannabinoids and terpenes the same way. The analogy to alcohol that more is more dangerous ubiquitously for everyone is faulty and is not scientifically supported. Thank you.
Our next comment comes from Rand Martin. Your microphone is unmuted.
Mr. Chair and members, Rand Martin on behalf of Kaliba. Without prejudging the legitimacy of the issue that Dr. Cermak has raised, and knowing that you may not answer me, I would like to raise a question about the legality of this motion. This item does not include any notice of possible action on this issue. It simply says a continuation of the discussion. The other items yesterday and today that you took action on all said possible action, which gives notice to the public that there may be some action that they may wish to comment on. So I would ask you to consider whether this motion is legal at this meeting or not. Thank you.
Our next comment comes from Wesley Hine. Your microphone is unmuted.
Wesley Hine, Mammoth Distribution. Let's not divert scarce research dollars away from the real problem, the illicit market. There is a big issue with underage individuals getting products from the illicit market, and a THC purity cap, which is what it would be, will significantly increase the illicit market by granting unlicensed operators a de facto exclusive on these products. Importantly, a purity cap will have no impact on THC consumption any more than a weak cup of coffee stops someone from taking another sip to help them wake up in the morning. Please focus on the problem, the real problem, youth access from the illicit market.
20 seconds.
I'm done.
Our next comment comes from Lynn Silver. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. This is Dr. Lynn Silver from the Public Health Institute. We strongly support Dr. Cermak's motion. Increasing potency of cannabis products has been highlighted globally and well documented as one of the most concerning trends in the market. How this issue is managed wisely or not may be the single most important determinant of the long-term balance of benefits and harms of legalization over time. We have seen major increases in daily use, and cannabis use disorder in young adults over the last decade, and frequent consumption of high-potency products has been associated with a 5-fold increase in psychosis as well as worsening of psychosis outcomes. We need to understand the state of the science, of its impacts, that's both positive and negative at higher doses, and what the best response options are for regulatory policy. Other places have taken different approaches. Canada limits to 30%. Quebec, Canada limits grams THCs, and others advocate for more standard and clear dosing. The Surgeon General.
Time has been reached. At this time, I do not, oh, I see one more comment. Our next commenter is Jason Sarouche. Your microphone is unmuted.
Hi, this is Jason Sarouche again. Dr. Lori Vollen would like to make a public comment, but she's not able to do it through her platform. Is it okay if I patch her through on my phone?
Yes, that is fine.
Okay, I'm patching Dr. Vollen through right now. Dr. Vollen, you're on.
Thank you. My name is Lori Vollen. I'm a California licensed physician with 20 years of experience helping patients harness medicinal properties of cannabis. And I'd just like to tell you that until vaping was invented, I had only seen about 1 or 2 patients in over 20 years of practice with cannabis abuse disorder. And since vape pens, that has changed dramatically, and I have seen a multitude of adolescents and professionals who feel that they cannot function without them. There's absolutely no safety data on inhalation of distillate in terms of both the concentration as well as the lung effects. And as a public health physician, board certified in public health, I'm shocked that it has been permitted without adequate research data.
Our next comment comes from Max. Your microphone is unmuted.
Thank you. Max McAlonis on behalf of Flow Cannabis Company. Just to take a step back, public health is one of the justifications of a regulated market, but estimates since 2019 suggest 2/3 of cannabis sales occur in the unregulated market. I am going to get to the motion at hand. In as much as this motion and the discussion of research and research on high THC products is being made in order to regulate or prohibit high THC products, we would caution that California not make the mistake of imagining prohibiting high THC products will do anything but lead to illicit market purchases and sales and a continuation of that unregulated status quo. Additionally, any caps of potency on manufactured products would necessitate the use of additives such as vitamin E acetate that we were warned against in the previous discussion. And so while this motion is important, I'm looking at the implications of this and urge caution with regards to the market. Thank you.
At this time, Chair, I do not see any other requests for public comment. Would you like me to close this feature?
Please close the feature and read back the motion to the committee members so we can take a vote.
This feature is closed. Before we read back the motion, I would like to call on Assistant Branch Chief Salama. If you can unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Chairman Farrow and committee member Cermak, you may already be aware of this, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention and in response to some of the public comments. Last week, the Bureau had released a request for proposals to public universities for research projects related to the implementation and effects of Proposition 64. And there are multiple categories in that RFP that call out some of these key areas that committee member Cermak is interested in. So I just wanted to bring to your attention, there is an opportunity for this research to be conducted and for there to be a report that comes out of that research that might serve the needs that are being asked for today.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. And what I would also assume that means is the funds that some people raised have already been committed for this really important research. And so this isn't funds that haven't already been earmarked for this good work. So
That is correct, Chair.
thank you very much. Thank you. So with that, would you be willing to read back the question, and that way we can have a vote?
So the motion is that CDPH request and support the Office of the President of the University of California to convene an expert scientific task force exempt from conflicts of interest to review the scientific literature on the issue of increasingly high potency THC content of cannabis and cannabis products, the state of the science on health implications of increasing potency, for example, but without limitation, upon dependency, mental health, drug driving, and health benefits, present a summary of the scientific data, and make public health recommendations to cannabis regulatory agencies and to the public. And with that, I will go to the vote. Bobulian.
Aye.
Cermak.
Aye.
Farah.
Aye.
Heidelbach.
Aye.
Karada.
Aye.
Lynch.
Aye.
Nevdal.
Aye.
Heck.
Aye.
Stevenson.
Aye.
Woolsey.
Aye.
Wu. And you. Can you repeat that? I did not catch your vote.
Yes, sorry, aye.
And Committee Member Wu, I didn't know if you unmuted yourself. Okay. Motion passes.
Thank you. We have now concluded all the items on our agenda, and we will be notifying shortly the date that'll be selected for next month. And I will work very hard to have an agenda in place early enough that we can get those out to our committee members. And I would urge you, if there are specific things in the interim that you don't feel they're sufficient, please reach out for additional information or review the business professional codes or other codes specific to the issues that will be put on the agenda. Thank you. We are adjourned.